What this review has done, so this study we've just launched in the last few days, has shown that out in the wild, the levels of neonicotinoids that are now present are sufficiently high to have population level effects on those organs, actually causing those species to decline. The way that these neonicotinoids are actually put into crops is by means of seed treatments. So it's actually coated onto the seed. And then the way it works is that as the plant grows, the chemical goes from the seed coating into the plant and it gets distributed throughout the plant. But what's become apparent in the last decade is that a huge proportion of the pesticide doesn't end up in the plant. It ends up in the soil, it ends up in the pollen where it's taken by beneficial pollinating species like bees and hoverflies and so on.
So the species we're talking about here, they're pretty fundamental to pollinating crops. How serious could this be in terms of food security worldwide?
Well, these systemic pesticides, they are having an impact on these really important species which deliver services which we're entirely reliant on. Agriculture could not work without these species. That is, at least in part, why we're really worried about this. I mean, I love wildlife. I'm worried about losing bees and butterflies just because I love them and they're wonderful to see. But they are also really, really important for, frankly, human survival on the planet.
Is there a risk that we're eating these crops and actually, if they're systemic, that means they're going to be in the wheat, the tomatoes we're eating as well? Are there any studies that have shown that there might be some negative effects for humans too?
We haven't looked at that. Having said that, however, there are some studies emerging, particularly from Japan, showing that one of the breakdown products from this, which is nicotinic acid, high concentrations of that can lead to a range of impacts on human health. The use of neonicotinoids in Japan, where these studies have been done, is very, very high. Don't want to overstate that, but there are potential impacts at quite a low level on humans as a consequence.
So it's all quite frightening about what the level of harm it could be causing. Is there not any legislation in place that's stopping or restricting the use of neonicotinoids?
Yes, there is. So this arose in about 2007-2008 in the European Union, when a number of countries suffered major die-offs of bees around beehives. And it became clear that what was happening was that the neonicotinoid can slough off the seed during planting. It actually creates a dust cloud. But if there are nearby hives, the concentration in that dust cloud is so concentrated it's instantaneously lethal to bees. And that clearly happened in a number of cases in European countries. And in one particular case, 2,500 hives were destroyed, 10 million bees were killed. And there have been a number of those incidents. And that led a number of countries in the European Union to actually ban their use in their country. And it led to a call across the European Union for a ban of neonicotinoids across all member states. And actually that was introduced about 6 months ago, the member states in the European, that all flowering crops now cannot be treated with neonicotinoids. And that's a welcome step, I think. But it is worth bearing in mind neonicotinoids are used on a whole range of other crops, not just flowering crops, and indeed in a whole range of other uses. For example, if you go and spray your bugs in your garden when you've got, trying to kill them off around the flowers, often neonicotinoids will be included in that spray, so it's used a great deal. But what I would say is these chemicals are damaging to the environment, and we would strongly recommend that regulators think about withdrawing them over time, certainly reducing their use over time in the environment, and regulating their use in more ways.